I'd like to, if we can kind of pivot away from this for a moment, and talk a little bit about some of the work now. We've spoken about it in the show a few times, but a big thing that happened recently was there was a big vigil regarding it was generally about people with autism that have been killed by either caregivers or family members or people with disabilities, but in particular there was a focus on one individual, and I wanted to talk to you about your work and organization around that. You want to tell us a little bit about the March 30th thing?
Okay, yeah, definitely. First, I want to say that the inspiration for the vigils was the death of a 22-year-old young man named George Hodgins. Mm-hmm. And that bringing this up is actually a great segue from talking about the representations, because one of the things that triggered our response was that a young woman who lives near where George lived and who is very active with ASAN, named Zoe Gross, she was really distressed by the fact that George's experience in life was being erased and how his death was being reported. A lot of the reports made it about a lack, in his case, wasn't true. It was just reusing a false, this myth. And yeah, there's a lack of services, but that's no excuse for ever killing a human being. I don't care if you're the person's autistic or, cerebral palsy, or, my step-grandmother has Lou Gehrig's. I mean, that's not an excuse for killing another human being on the basis of disability. George had actually his mother had just pulled him out of a day program saying, oh, well, I want him to have more community-based services. But then she never pursued finding those services. And she pulled him out before she had another plan. And so, she was able to gain sympathy after she killed her son and then herself, basically because, he wasn't receiving services then. And it really did play into this image of, the self-sacrificial mother. When we talk about how it's actually not a good thing that she killed George, or that Robert Latimer killed his daughter Tracy.
Right.
We come up against this cultural myth or ideal that, all mothers are inherently, maternal, and that they inherently want the best thing for their child.
Or just different interpretations of what that best thing is, and that for some people who are, either uncomfortable or for whatever other reasons, culturally and otherwise, are sort of conditioned to not necessarily value a person with disabilities life, a disabled life as opposed to a non-disabled life, that it's considered less shocking or criminal or whatever. Of course, the fact that she also took her own life is, it sort of compounds the tragedy, or suggests that she maybe didn't ultimately feel that she did the right thing. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We're going to talk a little bit more about the experience
the vigil,
of a parent.
Yeah.
I do want to talk. I want to go back to the vigil, because your particularly your organization regarding it, not just the ASAN thing, but you specifically worked on something with the DC vigil. I want you to tell us about that.
Okay. Yeah. So anyhow, Zoe arranged the first vigil, and while she was doing that, there was a Canadian program that had on Tracy Latimer and some other people that advocated if you have a child with disabilities, you should have a right to kill them. And when between people at ASAN being really upset about this and Zoe finding out the incredible irony of having that air, we decided on having vigils across the country.
Yeah.
And, we have vigils in Boston and New York City. If you go to our Facebook page, if you go to our Facebook page, you can see pictures from the vigils. And if anybody has, pictures or video from your local vigil, feel free to let us know because we would love to share that.
Mm-hmm. And the ASAN site. I'm very sorry. Excuse me. Go ahead.
No, you could go ahead and say something. Yeah. I'm just really bad at telling when I'm supposed to speak and other people are supposed to speak.
No, so. Well, we're not in the same room together. It's a little tricky. But I was just going to say the website for ASAN is autisticadvocacy.org, right?
Yes, that's correct. And if you look up Autistic Self-Advocacy Network on Facebook, we're there. Mm-hmm. I've been informed by somebody that was looking for us, though, that if you type in autism instead, you won't find us. So it is Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. And we're also on Twitter and on Google+.
I think that's an interesting distinction.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
And autistic. I heard somebody on the radio recently, it might have been John Elder Robinson who wrote the book, Look Me in the Eye, and basically he said, I'm autistic. I'm not a person with autism. Yeah. He was really emphatic. I'm an autistic. That's what I am. It's part of my...
Yeah.
It's part of me. It's okay.
Mm. Right, because it had been it was an interesting thing, and it stood out to TK and others of us because there is a whole linguistic aspect to the whole thing of identity movements and disability identity stuff, which is don't label me with my condition or whatever it is. I'm a person first, and then a condition is part of that. And he was sort of arguing the opposite, which is a very interesting thing. And I think that deaf people might say the same thing. I mean, in part just because it's sort of the idea that it seems silly or it seems too many words to say a person with deafness, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that you made that there is that parallel with autism or autistic, I guess, and deaf culture, because there really is a thing that and it has a lot to do, I think, with deafness. I think there's a lot to do with because that situation involves communication.
Yeah, definitely. If you could make a note, then maybe we could come back to the autistic versus autism,
Well, we could just have you on again too. That's also a possibility.
Oh yeah, I'm more than happy to come on.
This
whatever
isn't too traumatic
feel the need. So.
Well, I do want to go back though to what you were saying about the vigil, and particularly that you organized a virtual vigil. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I personally live in rural northwestern Pennsylvania. It's 2 hours to my psychiatrist in Pittsburgh. So it's really hard for people that live in places like I do to get to things. And I have other friends who have other disabilities. I have a good friend, Sharon, who has Lyme disease, who is housebound the majority of the time. And, these vigils weren't, envisioned as a autistic-only thing. We envisioned them as a chance for, us to really come together and mourn and recognize, that people with disabilities are being, murdered in what amounts to, domestic violence or domestic homicide.
And it's passed off as mercy killing, kind of, which is also a misnomer.
It's not treated as seriously because it's people with disabilities. And, I've been very upset in the past because I haven't, and some of my friends haven't been able to get to in-person actions.
Right.
And, after my experiences last fall with doing some remote work with the Occupy movement, I, went to Ari Naiman and to Zoe, and I said, look, I really think that it's going to be important for the power and the voice of people who are in rural areas and people who are housebound or who otherwise can't physically get to a site. I think that it would be a really great idea to do a virtual vigil. And so we set up a tiny chat room and a Facebook event page, a separate Facebook event page for the virtual vigil. And it so happened that I was in D.C. at the time for a separate thing. I had been in town for something for the Administration on Developmental Disabilities that I was helping out with. And I was able to stay with a friend and stay, that little bit longer so that I could be physically at the DC Vigil. And what we did was I had my netbook, and as long as my battery lasted, I was live streaming the DC Vigil and giving people that were in the chat room a chance to participate and actively be a part of it. We
actually had somebody on in last fall or really in the winter. I'm totally spacing on Tim Poole, who was somebody who had sort of done a live streaming, like literally like a marathon, like almost 24-hour live streaming of a bunch of stuff that was going on in the Occupy Wall Street thing when they got ejected from Zuccotti Park. And part of the reason I had him on, although we didn't end up really talking too much, but the reason why I wanted to have him on was because he was somebody who literally, for me, granted it was mostly in the middle of the night and I was in New York, I just wasn't able to get out to the thing, but he really did provide in a way that the Occupy thing in a way is different from a lot of other things, that they did essentially provide a virtual, or at least he did, individually, provided a virtual a means for someone who wouldn't be able to physically get there to have a virtual presence at that thing or be part of it.
Yeah, I personally, I can say that my mother and I both stayed up late when I think it was it Berkeley? No, Oakland. When Oakland was getting pushed around.
Yeah.
And the people that live streamed that, it was truly a transformative experience to be able to find a way to participate. And I think that the people who live streamed it, I don't know that they were really originally thinking of it as being a way to bring in, the voices of marginalized, members of the movement. But it is, a side effect of what happened when they did that, was that they enabled and empowered people who might not be able to get to a site to be a part of this movement. And I think that was just an incredible thing for movements in this country.
Right. Listen, we're going to, Savannah, thank you so much for being with us today. You did a great job. I think you brought a lot of important information out to people. By the way, I'm sorry, I should have been mentioning this, but you were listening to The Largest Minority, the Disability Affairs Program in WBAI, and we have been speaking with Savannah Logson Breakstone. And we want to thank you so much for for coming on and telling us about all this stuff. We're going to take a quick break, but we would love to have you back on.
Yep.
Say again?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
I'd love that, too.
Okay, and for those of you who are all listening, first of all, I'm sure that the Occupy people are all fluttering their fingers in the air, and I'm sure you can all send your encouragement and encourage Savannah to come back on our show going through Facebook or through other means. But thank you very much. When we come back, we're going to be speaking with Lisa Quinones Fontanes and about her website, autismwonderland.com. So stay tuned. We'll be back in a few moments.
First of all, we started rewarding people not for making things or inventing things. We didn't reward them for their idea or their labor anymore. We reward people for making money off money and moving money around.
Can you imagine giving $787 billion to poor people? It only takes $50 billion to wipe out poverty in major portions of the country.
The beginning is near, an evening with Cornel West and Michael Moore, a special Brecht Forum benefit on May 18th at Hunter College Assembly Hall, located at 695 Park Avenue, corner of 68th Street. An evening with Cornel West and Michael Moore for a special Brecht Forum benefit on May 18th at Hunter College Assembly Hall. For more information, go to the website at www.brechtforum.org.